Again, welcome to Inclusive Teaching in Natural and Applied Science courses, the experiences of one community of practice, presented by University of Wisconsin, Green Bay.
Thank you, Faith. We appreciate you helping us to moderate today. And there will be natural pauses throughout our presentation where we'll check in with the chat and see if there are questions for us as a group. We're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves because we're a whole crew. And so to do that, we're just going to use this one slide to keep us on track. And we'll go in the order of our pictures.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Caroline Boswell, and I'm the former director of the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. I recently have moved to the University of Louisville. Thanks for being here with us this morning.
Morning, everybody. My name is Amy Kabrhel. I am an associate professor of chemistry at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay.
And hello, I'm Kris Vespia. I'm a professor of psychology and the interim director of the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning at UW Green Bay.
Hi, I'm Heidi Fencl, and I am professor of physics at University of Wisconsin Green Bay.
And I am Nichole LaGrow. I am the distance education coordinator at UW Green Bay and a member of the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning team.
So when we attend conferences, I at least, and I think we all agree, are always sort of listening to what's being said, but with part of our brain thinking, is this something we want to reproduce in some form or use at our campus? And if so, then of course, you're sort of thinking, can we, right? What are the resources? What are the constraints? So we want to start with a little bit of context first of the university. And then Amy and I also want to talk about why and why now for this particular project. So very quickly, the context of the university. Our science department is in fact a science department. It's not a chemistry or physics department, but rather part of biology, almost all of chemistry, all of physics, all of earth sciences. Am I forgetting anyone, Amy? We're all together in one big budgetary unit. So while small curricular decisions are made at the department level, they have to be approved at the large level, and all budgetary decisions are made there. So we're large. In other words, I'm saying we're large and kind of unruly in structure in some ways. So sometimes it's hard to make decisions. And as probably most of you, we are under-resourced. We are also a 4-campus university. So we have a 4-year campus with a couple graduate programs at Green Bay itself. Then we have 3 2-year campuses, and that merger into one institution is fairly recent. So I want to talk just a bit more about the culture of the 4-year campus. Amy will talk about the 2-year campuses. So basically the 4-year campus, like I say, we've got this varied unit. We don't have a history of faculty development. And I think that's important for why this project mattered so much to us, is that there is no culture by which we have all participated in some way in this ongoing and expectations of a great deal of faculty development. And then, of course, because we're a multi-subject, a multi-discipline department, the conversations, even within our own disciplines, for the 4-year campus have not been ongoing. And Amy may say something different about the 2-year campuses. So we have a history of efforts, right? Within the intro bio course, different faculty members have done some things. We've had some small groups come together around maybe climate and trying to do some common expectations. So there have been pockets of work in EDI and just pedagogy in general, but there hasn't been this big overall history or picture. So Amy, I'll let you talk about the 2 years, and then I'll talk a little why now and toss it back.
Thanks, Heidi. So like Heidi said, the history of our university, our 4-campus model, started about 4 years ago when the UW system decided to merge the 2-year campuses with their nearest 4-year neighbor. I primarily teach at the Manitowoc campus, which was traditionally part of a 13-campus 2-year system model around the entire state of Wisconsin. And because of the merger, we became part of the UW Green Bay campus university. And so the 2-year campuses that merged with Green Bay had historically been very focused on teaching and excellence in teaching and serving as an access institution for the state of Wisconsin. There was really no requirements for students to be admitted other than they had to have, graduated high school or have a GED equivalent. And that's pretty much it. And so we've always existed as an access institution. And now we were merged with a four-year university that was a little bit different, had different expectations. Traditionally in our former departments, we were very teaching focused. And what that meant was we very strongly encouraged people to seek out professional development opportunities related to teaching and teaching excellence. And so when we merged with Green Bay, we were feeling like maybe that wasn't quite the same. And so we have been trying to encourage our department to seek out these new opportunities and to work as a department to increase teaching excellence, especially because our university is now moving to becoming an access institution. The whole four-year university is now an access institution. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but these are all the histories of our merger and why this movement that we did was really, really important.
So as Amy and I were talking about the why and the why now, it sort of became to us maybe a because we can and because we must. So I sort of have the why now because we can. And I think you're already seeing that merger provided some really important resource in a way that you wouldn't expect. And I think that is the big thing we want to say. So there were some resources, right? So there's monetary resource in terms of a little bit of CARES Act funding. And I think Nichole and Caroline can maybe speak to that more, but from the perspective of faculty, those few $100s, I don't know that was the main motivation. It was nice, right? But the monetary resource didn't turn out to be the main resource. We did have a resource in terms of administration change. And so we had change at sort of the chancellor level, which filtered down a little bit. And of course, culturally, right, with Black Lives Matter and other things going on politically in the pandemic, there was a change in our upper administration to focus more on the importance of EDI. We had some change at or at least recognition at the department level. So our chair did, when we went to him and said, can we form a departmental EDI committee? He said, absolutely. I don't know that we have mid-level support, but certainly at those two levels, there's some new administrative support that we used to have. But I think you can see that the biggest thing that happened, the biggest resource change we had was in terms of the people. And for us, as Amy talked about, with this strong focus on teaching and faculty development of the faculty members who came in the merger between the 2-year and the 4-year colleges, what we had was this, critical mass of tenured people with a history and concern about faculty development. So the voice became larger. There's a voice that had tenure behind it. There's a voice that had unity behind it. And so rather than individual voices trying to make changes, sort of being isolated or alone, or not able to form that group because everybody's busy, right? And so as you're thinking about your campuses, I think the biggest thing, you're not maybe going to have a merger, but I think the biggest thing in a resource is finding that core group that has the security of tenure and the unified voice to speak together. So to me, that was our biggest why now that allowed such a great thing to happen.
Thanks, Heidi. And so I'm going to speak to the why must. And one of the biggest things that we wanted to really focus on is the fact that we're becoming an access institution. And that means we're going to have a lot more students who have different preparation in their gateway courses than maybe they did previously. So we really felt like now was the time that we had to act fast. We're now an access institution. The student body is going to be a little bit different. We must act now to make sure that our students are successful in their STEM courses and can move forward with their majors. And so as we become an access institution, again, what this really means is we need to try to eliminate the hidden curriculum that we see in some gateway courses. A lot of students who are first gen don't really understand how to navigate the college experience right away. So removing what we call the hidden curriculum is really important. And sometimes that starts with informing instructors of what really is their hidden curriculum that they're not even aware of. We also need to help students adjust to college talk, like what is a provost, what is a chancellor, right? We need to kind of eliminate all this terminology because it can be a huge barrier to students being successful, and try to speak a language that they can understand. And again, this really starts in that first year of college. And so Gateway STEM courses are going to be some of their first exposures to that. We need to sometimes tell a student how to use a textbook, how to study and build a study schedule, how to be efficient with their studying and not waste a lot of time, because they're probably going to be spending a lot more time studying than maybe they did in high school. We also, as we're becoming an access institution, we're reducing the number of prerequisites required for some of these gateway courses because we want more students to be able to access the university right away. Obviously, this is going to change their preparation level for these gateway courses, and we want to be able to serve the students well, even if they're coming in at a different preparation level. So all of these factors played into the need for our department to really look at how we can successfully teach these courses to a new body of students, and all hopefully serve these students really well so they can continue on in their STEM majors.
Okay, now Nichole and I are going to talk a little bit about why we worked with Heidi and Amy to develop a community of practice. So a quick overview of what a community practice is, and then how and why we organized it. So I'm going to go ahead and start, but in the interim, if you have an opportunity, can you go to the chat and let us know if you've ever participated or helped facilitate a community of practice or a faculty learning community, just so we have an idea of how familiar people are with this sort of faculty development opportunity. Oh, great. Okay, thank you. You can go ahead, Nichole, and advance it while people are taking a chance to. I love this. I'm a historian by training, so I love the discussion of context that we have here. And so there's multiple reasons why we went with a community of practice. So some of it is based on research, right? So many of you likely know that one-off workshops, while not impactful, have far less impact and are unlikely to promote sustained change in behavior, right? So the ways in which we teach, if we really want to be thinking critically about that and be critically reflective practitioners, we need to have sustained engagement. It also, of course, builds community and enables the sort of culture change that Heidi and Amy were talking about, right? That's a difficult process when culture is long ingrained. And so you really do need to build community, and the community of practice model does help with that. One of the other pieces of it too is that it helps if you have shared faculty interests, right, in equity and inclusion. What you're doing then is bringing that together and offering them a place to engage with their colleagues in that. So you're not hoping that those are happening in those informal spaces, be it hallways, lunch spaces, or even kind of professor offices. You're helping facilitate that space so that people can connect. And so that's a big piece of it too. And so part of what I want to make sure we reference too is that originally we had, Heidi and Amy came to us, and for further context, right, faculty developers are always reliant on faculty champions like Heidi and Amy to help bring us to the faculty, right? Because, like I said, I'm a historian by training. STEM instructors may think that I don't understand their context or their experience. And also they don't have a working relationship with me in the way that they do with their colleagues. So being able to connect specifically to those faculty champions, and then also being an ally for those champions who may struggle with colleagues who are less invested in pedagogy or faculty development, I think is an important part of the work that we do. And so when they came to us, they had already, a big coup from my perspective, had convinced their chair to host a workshop. And Nichole talked a little bit more about that. And that's where we had the conversation of, well, can we use this workshop as a springboard for longer, more sustained engagement so that we can help promote that behavioral change that we all wanted to see?
Thank you, Caroline. So for our purposes, as we began building our community of practice, and Caroline initially met with Heidi and Amy to talk about what this might look like and how we could move forward with this, and then involve me in the process. Once she and Heidi and Amy had a kernel of an idea of what we were doing, But we did, as Caroline mentioned, begin with a campus-wide workshop that was provided for us by external speakers. And so we invited in external speakers specifically to share with us strategies that would help to create and foster that awareness of the hidden curriculum in our STEM courses specifically, but then also could be applied to courses across the curriculum, and then also address our large lecture courses. As a regional university, we tend to have a lot of large lectures, and that's also been a challenge as we've navigated being an access-oriented or an access institution. And so we really wanted to address some of the struggle points or the pain points within our STEM courses, and more specifically, but then also more broadly, our community of practice as a whole within our institution. And so we really started by participating and partnering with our faculty group in the natural and applied sciences to support that workshop and encourage individuals to attend that workshop. We cross-promoted it in our Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning, which we call CATL. So if we refer to it as CATL, that's what we're talking about. And we wanted to also make sure that we were encouraging the outreach to participate in the continuing work of the community of practice through Heidi and Amy. So they did an excellent job of recruiting faculty to participate with us. And then we also made the decision to use Canvas intentionally, right? So that all of our faculty were being enrolled in Canvas as a student. That was my perspective as a distance education coordinator. I wanted Amy and Heidi and their colleagues to participate in our learning management system as a student, so they might understand a little bit better how their students experience being in that learning management system. And then it also allowed us to continue the conversation beyond our monthly meetings, so that there was a blend of synchronous and asynchronous work to maximize our time together in our monthly meetings, but then to allow the conversation to naturally continue. We did have graded, and you'll see a rubric for one of our assignments later. We did have graded assignments, but it was more of a complete incomplete than something that we were actually going in and grading with a specific rubric to say, oh, you missed that one concept, or you didn't acquire this knowledge. That's not what our community of practice was about. But we wanted some accountability for the faculty who are participating, so they would know what they had to do, but then also some way for us to report back in our final report on the community of practice about the practices and strategies that were shared and what seemed to resonate most with our faculty. I'm going to pause before I turn it over to Kris to share where we're going next, to see if there are any questions so far about our what and our what now. And I'm sure we can post in the chat some information about our external speakers so that all of you can check out their resources as well. And I'll also be sharing towards the end of our session a list of some of the resources we've compiled as a community of practice as a shareable Google Doc for all of you to take advantage of.
Yeah, Nichole, if I could just add while we're waiting to see if folks have questions. If you're thinking about whether you're a faculty developer or just an invested faculty member or staff member thinking about building something like a community of practice, one of the main parts of this model, like Nichole suggested, is that you're really facilitating conversations amongst faculty and bringing their insights to the fore. You're trying to help build that accountability to each other versus to yourself or to the institution through the structure of something like Canvas. And that's, academics like to quibble. That's one of the main differences. If there is a difference between a faculty learning community and community of practice, is faculty learning communities, the facilitator often is more of an instructor than in the cases of a community of practice, where it really is a facilitation, and the expertise that's coming to the fore is from the faculty.
Okay. I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now. So Nichole, if you want to advance, I should provide just a little bit of context for my involvement. So I became the interim director of CATL. And by the way, Amy, thank you for sharing the link. You'll notice that we have embraced our acronym, and that if you go to our blog site, there are cows in the background. So, we do have a quirky sense of humor about these things. But at any rate, I became the interim director at the very beginning of this current semester. And so I wasn't involved in the community of practice from the beginning, and now I'm co-facilitating it. And so I have sort of an insider-outsider perspective, which has been, interesting to gain. And even as we met this week, Nichole was having to provide some history in the meeting as I was making a suggestion that they had already dealt with a year ago. But it also is a great part of continuing to build community for them to have welcomed me in this semester. And we'll get to that a little bit in our next step. So could you advance, please? The first thing I wanted to do is just share a few of the lessons learned from this community of practice. And then I wanted to talk about our future steps. This may seem a little bit backward, but then we're going to get into sharing with you some of the specifics and the activities that we did in the community of practice, and we hope to get your engagement with that. But to kind of skip to the end of the story in a sense, some of the things that we learned through the process of creating that is that it's really important, thinking back to what Caroline just said about the distinction between learning communities and communities of practice. It's really important to set this up with the expectation that everyone in the group is a teacher and a learner. And so you may have facilitators for this, but I'm learning every bit as much as the other members are, and for me as well. I've got some colleagues who would say psychology is STEM, but I'm not teaching chemistry here, people. So I'm learning a whole lot about the disciplines, but I'm also learning a lot about the context in which they're taught, and relying on our faculty expertise. One of the other things we learned can be really important here is to think about course selection before you think about instructor selection for communities of practice. So, Caroline and members of the team did a lot of advanced work to actually find the gateway courses in our curriculum that had significant equity gaps, whether those were equity gaps among first generation and continuing generation college students, males and females, BIPOC students, and majority group students, so on. And so we could see the classes where there were issues, and also identify classes that were particularly important to advancement in a major. So, for example, if a student can't get through our introductory biology class, they're not going to be able to go on to become a nurse, right? And so where do we really need to focus our attention? And so it started at the course level, and then you start looking, of course, at instructors. And I know, Heidi and Amy had both mentioned, for example, the security of tenure is something that can be important, at least initially, if you're trying to talk about people who might be instituting structural changes in the future. And doing these sort of natural groupings where people are teaching in similar areas, I think can also, be very helpful. The participants in this community of practice have also reflected on the fact that within the first year of this community, people really varied in their depth of participation, and that they noticed that people who did dig deeper in that participation benefited more, but that everyone seemed to benefit as long as they put their toe in the water. And so, as facilitators, yes, you want to encourage that rigorous and in-depth involvement, but any participation may really be helpful, especially when you start talking about cultural change within a unit and attitudinal change. We also learned that it can be really helpful to work on promoting structure and promoting relationships within community of practice. Most faculty are not accustomed to working in this kind of group environment, right? And so some initial structured activities can help as you're trying to get that experience going, and doing things like having faculty members searching for articles and bringing them in, right, starts to give them ownership of their expertise within that community, but then also making sure to intentionally build in collaborative kinds of activities such as peer review is really facilitating that development of relationship and community that you're also hoping will happen. I think that the other lessons folks have reflected upon are some of the benefits that they have already seen from this. One is that just having that hour-and-a-half meeting, or however long that meeting is going to be, forces the creation of time and space to have conversations that wouldn't otherwise happen, right? Where you're busy, you're in your offices, students are coming by, you're going to your next committee meeting, and our lives in academia. You may want to have those conversations, but it's just, there's not the time or space to get everyone together. And so that's one real benefit. We're all at a stressful time in higher education, right? We know budgets are tough. COVID has, introduced all sorts of unknowable stressors at the time that it happened. But in addition to that, we were dealing with the creation of 4 campuses out of what used to be 1, right? And we were also dealing with becoming an access institution where we hadn't been before. And so we have people who are now colleagues who used to be at different institutions, right? We've got the financial pressures, we got COVID, we got all this stuff going on. And I think what we found is that it did help to build some real bridges amongst those different campuses. And when we talk now about being 1 campus and 4 locations, that feels more genuine today than it probably did 4 years ago, right? And I look at Amy, and we work and live in different communities, but Amy is my colleague and Amy's my friend, and it's different. That's a different feeling today. And natural and applied sciences itself has seen some tangible changes. I'm not going to say that that's directly the result of this community of practice, but they do have a specific diversity series in their unit now, and they have brought in speakers on a regular basis this past year. And so they're seeing some environmental change in that sense. Next slide, please. And then just to let you know what we're thinking about for the future, we've already started discussions about, okay, does this just become an ongoing community of practice? And does that mean that membership changes over time? Or there may be, a couple of existing members who stay as we bring new people in, that folks kind of rotate in and out to expose more members of this unit to the community of practice, but also have the continuity of some voices that have been there. CATL is planning to bring in some speakers in the spring to particularly speak to the sciences, even though they will be beneficial for others, because one thing that we find in faculty development is that EDI work and selling that can be a little hard for bench scientists sometimes, because they automatically think about that as teaching about diversity rather than thinking about pedagogy process, right? And so we specifically wanted to bring in some scientists to speak to that, who are going to be credible voices to this group of folks. So we're bringing in a former faculty member of ours from about, 5 to 10 years ago, who's now a provost at another institution, but who did equity gap work while she was here and has continued to do that research. And yes, I'd be happy to share with you some of those folks. And the other person that we're bringing in, this may sound a little different, we're bringing in someone to talk about trauma-informed education. But this person is also a neuroscientist, and so is speaking to it from a different lens. And that person, yes, thank you, Caroline. Yes, Maze Ahmad, exactly, is going to be coming in February. So that's something that we're looking at doing, and hoping that we will be, over time, building knowledge about and use of equity-based pedagogies in our College of Science, Engineering, and Technology. And I know the members of this community of practice are really committed to trying to see some structural changes in the curriculum, changes to or removal of prerequisites for certain classes, other kinds of things like that could make navigating the curriculum easier for all of our students. So I'm seeing stuff is happening in the chat. I'm done with my piece, but I'm happy to take questions, and I'll let Nichole kind of transfer us, or whoever is supposed to move us ahead to the next section.
So we're just going to pause a moment and allow everyone to process all the information we've shared. And I know that there's some information that is coming through on the chat with some of the external speakers that we've invited. And hopefully that will answer some of those questions that were percolating while we were speaking. We are going to move into breakout rooms. We'll have 3 breakout rooms. Amy, Heidi, and I are each going to facilitate those breakout rooms and share with you one of our favorite activities from our community of practice time together. And we'll just share what that activity was and a little bit about why we liked it, and have an informal conversation with you as participants about that tool or that activity. Kris and Caroline are going to stay in the main room. So we've had experience ourselves. So if you get bumped and you're lost and you come back in, Kris and Caroline will be there in the main room to continue the conversation with you. What we intend to do, and hopefully it works, and Faith is going to be superstar and help us with this, but we are going to move ourselves. So we'll put you all in breakout rooms, and then Amy, Heidi, and I will rotate through, and we'll share with you those strategies individually as we come into your breakout room. So you'll stay with the same group, and Amy, Heidi, and I will move through. We will also plan on taking 7 to 10 minutes to talk about our strategies with you, and then hopefully have time at the end to come back for a larger conversation. But before we begin that activity, I wanted to check in and see if there were any questions about what we did, why we did it, how we did it, before we begin moving everybody. That's always the fun part.
All right, as I prepare the breakout rooms, once the breakout rooms are established, you will see a pop-up that says join room, and it'll have the room number. If you'll just click that join button, it'll pop you right into that room.
Welcome back, folks.
Hello.
All right. Well, welcome back. I hope the breakout rooms went really well, and it looks like we've got some good time for discussion. Since Caroline and I were not in the rooms, I don't know what to suggest leading out of them, but we'll let one of our other presenters sort of take the lead on that.
Well, I will say I felt like I was in 3 mini community of practices, because we had really rich and engaging conversations with each of the groups that I met with. And so thank you for engaging with us and sharing your observations and ideas. And I think this would be a good time for us to check in and see if there were any lingering questions you had, either about the initial presentation where we talked about our overall ideas of how we started our community practice, or any specific questions about our specific strategies that we shared. And I know that there was one request for the actual survey, so I'm going to make sure that gets put into the chat. And I'm actually going to turn off my camera so I can move again, because the sun is creating this wonderful halo effect that I actually kind of like, but I don't think it's probably pleasing to all of you. So I'll be back. I'm here listening, but I'm just going to move. So.
And I see that Jen has a hand up. What would you?
Hi.
Go ahead, Jen.
I had started picking Nichole's brain in the last little breakout room that we were in. And so I'm an instructional designer at an R1 STEM school. And I mainly deal with online graduate programs, but I have trouble staying in my lane. So I kind of want to, bring this larger conversation of DEI to the entire institution. One of the main problems that I have, though, is faculty's limited time to dedicate to these conversations, right? Because they do have an overwhelming number of commitments, whether it be their research, right, or other committees that they're serving on, which I'm sure you can all appreciate. So I've tried launching COPs at this institution. I've worked at other institutions before and had a really hard time getting people to even sign up. I'm not even talking about commitment, like even sign up to a point where I can get started. So do you have any advice?
I'm going to jump in with a real small thing, which is not community of practice, but the toe in the water. and then let Amy and Caroline and Nichole go further. But we were able to get our department chair to devote one department meeting time to a workshop. Now, that was not a community of practice. It was a great workshop. And it's the one that was led by, in part by a bio professor who teaches large enrollment class. So you can't dismiss and say, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about in my situation. So a well-chosen good speaker, if a department chair will give a required department meeting, in this case, I'd maybe say, once a year or something to build it. So that was a toe in the water that I think, and Amy can say otherwise, but I think that experience did give us a little momentum. I think that we had people join the community of practice who would not otherwise have done so if it weren't for that workshop. I don't know if you agree or disagree, Amy.
I do. Thanks, Heidi. I think that's really true. I think Heidi also mentioned way earlier in our presentation that we need champions. And sometimes those champions are chairs of EDI committees within departments. Sometimes they're the chair of the department themselves. But you need somebody to champion it. And the other thing I think you need a department to value it. And maybe that means that they need to say that it is valued for promotion and tenure, right? Sometimes it needs to be as big as that, because then if it's valued, the participants see that not only am I going to gain some experiences and the ability to teach well to my students, but also I'm going to get credit for it when I go up for tenure and promotion. Some departments don't value professional development in the areas of teaching and learning, which makes me very sad, but other departments do. And so if we can get a mentality change in some of these old school beliefs that really the only thing that matters is research, and instead get people to understand that professional development in the areas of teaching and learning are really, really valuable and important too, I think that can make a big impact on the buy-in of people. Because they have limited time, they're only going to want to buy into things that are valued by the people that are going to tenure or promote them.
Right. Well, I guess, because we're in R1, you can imagine where most of the focus is, right? And
Yes.
we don't have a school of education. So it makes it that much more difficult because there is no scholarship around teaching and learning at the institution. So it's me as a grassroots movement, 'cause we all know it's important. But, to convince a dean or chair that this sort of activity is important is really it's a monumental task when they have so much pressures on numbers.
What is the enrollment situation of your university? Because always, if you have, and you know this, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but when you can connect what your initiatives and importance are with those immediate priorities of the institution, right? So if enrollment is dropping, or if it's hard to, or if you foresee enrollment dropping because of demographics, then connecting this work into retention or recruitment of students to something, So are there initiatives or concerns at the university level that this connects with?
It's a good idea.
I would just add to Heidi's observation about the universities or institutions' goals or ideals, right? For me, as a distance education coordinator, I traveled between and among the campuses at least, and I would visit each campus at least once a month, if not once a semester before the pandemic, and we all moved to working differently. And so I can actually see a significant transformation within the NAS faculty and their cohesion and their willingness and ability to work together as a group, and not see that distinction between campus locations and really see themselves as more as one unit. It's not perfect. We're still making progress in that way. But I think that for us is also, at least from my perspective as a distance education coordinator, an important point in emphasizing and celebrating what this community of practice has done is it really has created a community across our locations.
I just echo and then ask Joseph to speak, because as he was in the chat asking about promotion and tenure, and I'd echo what Heidi said back, that we do have initiatives underway as part of an EDI committee that I co-chair and that Heidi is also a member of. but those are, not universally supported at the university, as you might imagine. On the other hand, we do for the first time have a question on our student evaluation of teaching that gets to inclusive classroom environment, and Caroline can probably speak more to that. I think using the enrollment and retention argument can be one that wins over some administrative voices if they are not convinced by the ethical argument. And, at this particular point in time, you do also have probably CARES Act money that is going to expire relatively soon, that might also provide some funding as an initial incentive to get participation. But Joseph, did I just sort of answer your question, or did you have an additional question?
Actually, yes and yes. You didn't answer my question. But actually, I didn't have a question, but I was going to make a comment to Jen's comment about not having a college of education. And the only thing I want to add there is that from my experience, it may or may not be a benefit to you, because I actually, in my role, have actually reached out to my College of Education's faculty to try to get them to be more engaged in some of our programming for scholarship and teaching and learning and whatnot. And I can tell you, one of the chair that I spoke with shared this with me. And he literally said, Joseph, we don't do that because we've done that before. And the other colleges tell us to go back into our own building, right? Because they don't believe in the scholarship of teaching or education. And it becomes more of a, don't tell me what to do or how to teach kind of reaction when you get them involved, because it does come with that, right? Unfortunately. So the same principle applies to faculty as anyone else. When you have someone come out in as sort of like the expert, then becomes, you're telling me what to do. No matter what the message may be, that's how it's going to be perceived. And so the college basically decided they're not going to do that outreach anymore because they get very negative reactions from their colleagues. So I think that's a very delicate dance that you have to do, because I've heard from others from the flip side who actually would share the same principle to me and say, don't come tell me what to do. They like to, and even for myself, I told my faculty, say, Joseph, if you want any faculty to do anything, make them believe it was their idea, right? Because otherwise they won't accept it no matter how valid it was. That is a problem. Hopefully one day we'll get over, but that's sort of like the thin ice you walk on if you want to bring in College of Education to be the resource of expertise. So
one other resource so for engineering, it's not true across all the sciences, but you can pick in any of the programs that have external accreditation. So ABET, which is engineering accreditation, they have and are moving towards more EDI as part of accreditation. And so if you can connect obviously with university initiatives or within departments, if they have accreditation or other initiatives that you can connect with, that's another place to step in.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I'm at a R1 institution now, Jen, and it's interesting to me. So the biology department here is highly engaged in teaching and learning, or SOTL. And so sometimes I do think, and I know we already made this point, but bringing in people from comparable institutions who do the work, not only for the faculty, but to model that to those who do come up with those policies around what counts as scholarship, can be useful because it is really rigorous. And I'm not sure if you mentioned this in your discussions, Nichole, but that was part of our plan of having the faculty research, is to see just how rigorous that scholarship is. So they would have a better understanding of, wow, this actually is really, really contributing and also time intensive, and not, it's different from, but not necessarily less than the research that I'm doing in my discipline.
Sorry, I was taking my notes, but thank you so much, everyone, for your answers. It's really helpful.
Well, and I was just looking up, and I'll share in the chat, Angie Bauer, who we referred to as one of the speakers, who will be hopefully coming here in the spring. I'll give you a link to a full text article of hers, which is a SOTL article, and is a randomized controlled trial. So it's, what scientists would be used to reading, and it's not, it's not that this is the article, but a lot of, Carol Dweck, who is, known best for her growth mindset work, much of that work is done in STEM. And so even though, she's a psychologist by training, but she's doing her work in the hard sciences, both in K-12 and at the college level. And so some of that work too might be inspiring. And it's also kind of interesting where you'll find, I know it's tempting to look at schools of education, and I understand why, but SOTL is actually specific to higher education research as opposed to K-12. And I don't mean that that's good or bad. I just mean it's different. And so you may find SOTL scholars in unexpected places. I mean, Heidi on our panel has done SOTL work throughout her academic career. And you wouldn't necessarily think to look for that person in physics, right, which is where she is. Our psychology department is very active in SOTL. Our history department is very active in SOTL. And so sometimes it's a matter of trying to figure out where those people are hidden and seeing if you can get together with them to give you some ideas about working within the faculty environment. Because even if they aren't in that department, they may know some of the politics and ins and outs of
it's actually an interesting thing I'll add on to Kris. So she said, I thought, yeah, but I'd never be hired by an R1. But one of the challenges that we see is, so I do physics education research, is that most of that research is actually coming out of R1s. We're struggling to get research about student learning in physics at comprehensive universities because it's small. You just have one person here and there. But physics departments at many R1s do have physics education research programs. So you've got your material science group, you've got your high energy group, and you've got your education research group. I don't know about your own institution, Jen, or anyone else if you have those, but there are, many R1s have such a program in physics, at least. I think chemistry also tends to as well. Okay.
I just want to add, we are a small R1, and we don't have, we have a College of Arts and Letters that serve undergraduate. I'm specifically in the online graduate programs. So there is no SOTL going on teaching, right? And as far as I know, so there has been a changing of the guard recently. And so we're getting a lot of newer instructors who are more open to dipping their toes into this. And that's who I'm trying to identify, to try to get, we've had some minor beginnings of relationships to try to get papers published, and, trying to just little things, right? Whether it's introducing active learning or any of these things, but it's a really slow go.
And I would say, Jen, and for others who are listening, and hopefully if you have other questions, please use the chat or raise your hand. We'd be happy to hear from everybody. But I would just say two things also that might help that. And we've experienced that right with our new community of practice. We have some new faculty or newer faculty who are not tenured as part of that group. And so there is potentially that tension as they move forward and they are trying to focus on and move through that process, that SOTL work and the community practice work might go on the back burner for a little while. But to the point we raised at the beginning, any forward movement or progress or development of those skills is important to us. And so we didn't turn anybody away. And we were very gracious when people said that they needed to take a semester off because of their teaching load or because of their research load or because of their conference presentation load now that conferences are happening in person again. And so I think it's important for us as the facilitators of the community of practice to be flexible in that way, and encourage people to feel comfortable and welcome in the community of practice in whatever capacity they can contribute in that semester, and to be clear about what that contribution should look like so that they know what they would have to do. And then the other thing I will share is our NAS community of practice just met yesterday, and Amy was there. And I think we're going to see a bit of a turning point amongst our faculty for some of them, not all of them, some of them are going to stay curmudgeonly. But I think some of our faculty are really struggling with the students that are coming into our universities and our colleges now because of the pandemic and the past 18 months of students learning asynchronously online. Tons of kudos to our K-12 colleagues who did the best in a horrible situation, but they weren't equipped, right? They didn't have learning management systems, many of them. They had to learn how to do that and move forward with teaching online. And I can speak as a mother of a high schooler and a middle schooler. I know the quality of the education they received. And again, the teachers did their best, but they weren't necessarily preparing them to learn in an online class in a higher education environment, or to even be successful in study skills and strategies and perseverance, or meeting deadlines, because deadlines were irrelevant for the past 18 months. And so I think faculty really are beginning to see that they might need to infuse some of these strategies in their class, or else students really aren't going to see, not because they're not capable or because they're weeding out. I love that phrase, right? They're weeding out the students who don't belong in the XYZ program, fill in the blank as you will, but because the students just don't have the skills to be able to do it. So hopefully that means we'll have more communities of practice.
Are there other questions or comments? I know we've only got maybe less than 5 minutes left in our session, and I was commenting to Caroline while you were in your rooms that you never want to be the group standing between folks and lunch. But questions, comments, you've all been great today.
I will just say thank you to all of you who are participants. So many of you are in faculty development in some way. As I discovered, I went between the groups, and huge gratitude to you folks. We couldn't be surviving this pandemic without you. So just whether or not faculty tell you all, we appreciate you, we need you. And it's been really good to meet so many of you today.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Amy, Caroline, Heidi, Kris, and Nichole. You all have been amazing hosts today. Thank you so much for driving this session and for doing such a great job sharing your experiences. It truly has been a great session. So thank you so much. And participants, we thank you for being with us as we flop through breakout rooms and all that great stuff. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did. So thank you so much for attending today. Again, recordings will be available shortly after the conference, and you will get an email when all of the recordings are available. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.